buenos días. Bueno, acá estamos todo el equipo.
This is all the development team. Thank you very much for being here so early. The idea of this dialogue is that you can talk to us about any problem or concern that you might have with GeneXus. But let's begin by introducing ourselves. And we will do it clockwise, and I will begin. I am Ana Berta. I work in the GeneXus Development Environment area, mostly with ground. Hi, my name is Guillermo Paquero. I work in the iOS generator. Good morning, Jorge Mastro Pietro. I work in Development Environment and GeneXus Server. Good morning, GeneXus Lamas. Good morning, Matias Hernandez, Development Environment and Android Generator. Ignacio Roqueta, I work with the Java Generator. Good morning, Fernando Paniza, I work with Android Generator. Good morning, my name is Eugenio, I work with Workflow, Portal and GExplorer. Good morning, my name is Gustavo Proto, and I do a bit of everything. Good morning, my name is Revetria, and I work in GAM and GExplorer. Good morning, my name is Pablo Muso, I work in Query Objects and GExplorer. Good morning, my name is Gonzalo Fernandez, I work in GExflow. Good morning, Oscar Fabricio, GeneXus Server. Good morning, Gonzalo Balotti, Web Generator. Alejandro Paniza, I work in the Ruby Generator and in DOS environment. Good morning, Cristian Intamuso, I work in the development environment. Gustavo Brown, I work with a specificator. Marcos Crispino, I work in the iOS generator. Carmen Assis, I work in the workflow modeler. Good morning, Nicolás Cardelino, I work with web generators. Alejandro Ceballos, I work in the security part of LAN. Claudio Murialdo, web generators. Fabián Intamuso, iOS generator. Juan Pablo Silvia, I work in GX server. Daniel Mendez, web generators and Ruby generators. Alejandro Silva, I work with generators. Good morning, Agustin Nin, I work with Android generator. Good morning, my name is Federico Asato, I work in the development environment and GX server. Sebastián Gómez, development environment and Win8. Gustavo Martínez, Object Query and GExplorer. Nicolás Jodal, and I'm lucky to be the first one to use everything they do. My name is Gaston Milano, and I work in architecture elements of GeneXus. So now we're open to receive your questions. You can put up your hand. Gabriel Martinez from Fabacar, Mar del Plata, Argentina. We are trying to exit GeneXus 9 and to get to Evolution 2. One of the doubts we had was, for instance, when we're working with RPG, our idea is to do web for the front end and RPG for the back end. We wanted to know whether we will be able to use data selectors from RPG. I am wired today. The idea is that those objects will not be available in data selects, but you wouldn't need them on an imminent basis. Right? I don't know. I'm still in 9. So, in principle, no. Good morning. Carlos Alvarez from Chile. I have a question. You're the youngest brother from yourself. I have Android code, and I would like to know how to integrate. There are several features I have to run offline, and I have to do it through the SQLite database. So how do I integrate them? With extensions or by creating code with Java and the code itself? How will that be done? The present integration with Android is just like you said, or on the other hand, you can do it through extensions with external objects, and there you would define your methods, then you supplement them in Java and Android. And in the wiki you will find information for this. You include external objects and then you call them to the methods that you might have implemented. That's how you should be doing the integration. Because in the case of GXQuery, I have one doubt here. Those routines that you have when working offline, did you read what we have about offline? No, I wasn't in that presentation. No, I just wanted to know whether this was supplementary or not. Some routines are in terms of accessing, so when it comes to... No, I just wanted to check. Nicolás, I recommend you on Monday. Proto and Masili gave a presentation in terms of what we're doing offline. Even Pablo showed an example about this. If you were not present, I recommend you to take a look at them on the web so that you can see what we're working at. Maybe this might be useful for you, or maybe you need to continue writing code manually. Finally, in terms of query, we already have pivot charts. Will you write any other type of charts for dashboards, for example, like speedometers and those type of things, or will we have to develop that ourselves? Let me see if I understood you. What other type of graphics are you needing? Maybe traffic lights, those sort of things that are associated to already existing objects. I would like to show some KPI that need to have some colors or look like a speedometer. The question is, will you be providing that? Will you develop something along that line? Well, that's the idea, but we still haven't gotten there. But what we're doing right now, the pivot, which is actually a flash control, is already available in JavaScript. So if you access it from an iPad, you can view it already. But the idea is to complete that in order to supplement the one we already had. Now there's a timeline that has been added to charts. But the idea is to continue to add view controls on the query object. Specifically, if you have a concrete example, please send it to me and we can see it. First, one suggestion. Well, the GX challenge you did internally was quite a good idea, so that one can consume the things you carry out. As a thing for the future, it would be good to develop the same application, but just using the documents and the fora that GeneXus has in order for you to feel what we feel when we're outside the development team. That's just a suggestion. And then, something I didn't see in the presentations that we had is the multi-tenant or multi-company issue. I didn't hear anything about this, so I wanted to know what you're doing in terms of that. About the first suggestion, I have been working on that for 3 months already. and I haven't been very welcome in terms of that by the development team. We're trying to improve the order, organization, content, and approach of all the documents. We have added more people to the team, but we're focusing on that, and I try to do some things myself, but we're moving on along that line. We can't do it, we can't work any magic here. It's a very big thing, but that's our goal. I would like to add something. Some of those who participated in the challenge really wanted to use a wiki or user documents. Maybe not most of us did it, but some people did it. We found some issues there and we tried to fix them, but yours is a good suggestion. Second, in terms of your second question, in terms of the multi-tenant, we had made progress in the TILO version that we've mentioned. We implemented the reorganizations for multi-tenant. In some cases, you might say this KB is multi-tenant, and this generates an instant impact in the terms of the ID of all the tables, but there are some things that are still missing there. Good morning, my name is Fernando Romeo from Argentina. Even though this is something that's not very widely used, I would like you to improve the updating of the protection server in licenses, because every time you change a version, you have to deinstall everything, reload licenses, and do everything. And maybe you could do that in an easier way so that we don't have to stop all the development team, download licenses, and do everything. You mean when the license expires? Or when you have to change version? Now I'm in Evolution 1, I have to move to Evolution 2. I have to deinstall the licenses, install protection server, load licenses again, and since all of that is done during my working hours, I have to stop my development team in order to be able to load all the licenses. So maybe that could be updated without the need to stop all the working team, but that shouldn't be necessary. You should be able to install the new protection server if you want to update everything, and that shouldn't be a condition. And after that, installing the licenses you need. But if I have Evolution 1 licenses, in order to move to number 2, I have to deinstall previous licenses and reinstall the new ones. Yes, so I have to uninstall everything and reinstall everything again. Since that is done during my working hours, at midday I need to stop all my development team from working. I uninstall all the licenses, I receive the new ones, I install protection servers, and then I download the new licenses. So I want to see the possibility of doing this in a more automatic or transparent way. We're taking note of your suggestion. Something else that I mentioned sometimes is the interactive debug for transactions. If I need to use the interactive debug in a transaction, for example, this is not supported in rules. And this is something that was never updated. That's what I was going to mention very briefly. Several features of the developer experience were somehow stalled, not because we wanted it to be so, but because the circumstances so deserved. In this Tilo version, we will be adding several developer features. So this starts to be more balanced in terms of the features we have for the application and the new features. Eventually, we will have to develop this once again, since many things have changed. I don't know if you have any new constraints there. The expert over here is telling me the no. So, from those type of features, we have several of them that we need to install. Tilo has not been closed yet. This is an instance for listening what is being required. So we're taking this as your concern. Thank you very much. Diego Duque, Swedish Match. What I see, what my clients in my work see, and what is uploaded in the administrative structure to managers are reports. And this is what you tend to do at the end, and this is where you have less time for doing this. And when you submit a report, then people tend to say, well, this is quite ugly. This can be improved, but everything has to be done manually. I would like, in terms of report generation, I would like this to be done through a pattern where we would have themes with fonts that are designed by a designer, font compilation, size compilation, colors that can be created automatically in the report, so that there's an ease for creating a report immediately with some visual quality, as is done by Crystal reports. I have talked to manufacturers of patterns, but I believe that if this were part of the development environment, this would be so much better. You went speechless. At some point, I talked to the development team about this, but maybe in this case we could apply some themes to reports so that the setting of many properties could be easier. I have talked about this with someone, I really don't remember who that person was, but we will take note of the suggestion and we will analyze this. In terms of applying themes to reports, well, that could facilitate use. Armin had something to say about that. Hi, Diego. One detail that we did was that in the last we supported HTML fields in PDF, so that HTML format we used to have tags and plain text. Now this is interpreted and this could be improved. But my question is, don't you use query or query viewer for that report? Or what format are you submitting those reports in? Because many of us who do those type of reports use the query object. You do query view, you use the charts, and then you have a nice pivot for that sort of managerial level. Are you using GeneXus report objects for generating a PDF, or how do you do that? Yes, whenever I can do query, I do. First, because the features are sensational, and the clients love it. But I cannot use it all the time because there are many data there, and the query object with too many data and too many columns becomes slow. When I run the query object, I immediately give the user the possibility of being interactive, so it becomes a bit slow. Something that I wanted to add. Some time ago, we worked in separating the rationale of the presentation of reports in Evolution 2. Now, in the Java generator, once the report has been developed, before getting into production, you can change the format. You can change fonts, colors, or the place where you put all the different controls without having to change the logic of that. That could be a first step, even though you're not applying themes to that, but you could give the report to some designer in order to have it improved without having to involve GeneXus there. Who's working so that I can have a face? Who's working with patterns? The boss, you mean? Do you want me to get there? He looks big when he goes there. This was something simple, but I have problems in the work with pattern, and sometimes I find that I want to erase the work with pattern and I cannot do it. So I have to start trying to find someone who can do that. Well, it's a problem we have tried to solve. I would like to believe that this has been improved from 9.0. At least we're trying to erase objects. The problem is that if a reference is being made by objects that are not generated by patterns, we don't have the authority to break that sort of bond. So we would have to see in what situations this happens. In some cases, we have detected this and corrected it. In the work with, if you have a series of steps that reproduce this problem, please contact me directly, because this is something that we want to improve. Since you have the gentleman over there, in terms of GXT, I had a problem when I changed from one version to another, because everything now goes directly to the cloud. So I think it would be interesting that the process becomes more automatic, that everything is on the cloud, that you don't need databases, etc. However, it would be good to have the alternative of doing this locally as we did before, or putting it in the cloud. It would be interesting that, same as the process is automatic in terms of certificate configuration in GXR, it would be good to have that automatic. I didn't understand your question. When you install GX Server with security, at some point it says that it had a problem with certificate 509 or something like that. So you have to start configuring the whole thing. In a couple of times I tried to do that. I found that something was not working well. The running of a certain batch that was not working. Yes, you mean at the time of setup of the GX Server. Where is Seba? Here I am. Oh, the thing that's not working, I cannot hear you. Now? The thing that's not working well, maybe that's because of a problem. In terms of certificates, for certificates to be good, it needs to be a certificate from your company issued by someone who's trustworthy. In our installation, we send one that's for a trial. Not for trial, but for it to be operational in your intranet environment. But actually, It should have to be a certificate that's from your company, issued by a certifying authority, etc. And the way of integrating it with the IES of Microsoft is the one that's described there. And there's not much we can do about it. Even we've tried to do things during the setup stage. Maybe we can move a little bit forward, but there are many manual things to be done there. One last comment. When we started working with GeneXus Server, we tried to run an automatic installation of this trial certificate, but this was not possible. Installation in Windows of GeneXus Server, those manual steps that you have to make, you need to validate, enter the password in your certificate in your PC. There was no automatic way of doing it through line of command. At least not then. There was no automation for that in Windows. That was not a feature that was available. Maybe we could review whether that is possible and we could add it. But when we did so, it wasn't possible. We consulted it with Federico Wagner, who is very knowledgeable on certificates and systems, and he said it wasn't possible because in terms of certificates, you need to have a valid certificate from your company, and you need to register on your server in order to provide security to the server. In terms of the first thing you mentioned, the fact that it's on the cloud, this is an optional feature. It's optional, and it's actually the environment that we are providing. We are providing prototyping environment. What do you mean by optional? There's a property that it says deploy to cloud. Yes, but that is disabled. Okay. I'm sorry. I hadn't listened to that. I hadn't listened that this was a trial version. Matthias was the one who was paying attention, not him. Another suggestion that you should consider for Tilio is that nowadays KBs are quite large, at least some of the ones I know, and there are many people involved in the work with different features. There are people who work with database administration, others are in charge of installing it, and GeneXus is very focused to the developer side and not so much to those chores which are also important in the life of the application. So if a database administrator gets into a KB in order to extract some information from the application, there are many properties which are absolutely useless. Wouldn't you be able to do some sort of views of the same KB, but just showing the relevant parts? For example, for a person who will be installing it, there are a set of properties that are important, but for others, maybe they are not so meaningful. There might be things that are important for the tester and not for the installer, or the reorganization might be very important for DBAs, but not for a developer. So in the cycle of the application, maybe you could analyze the different roles and try to customize that to make everything easier in terms of each of those steps. We've gone through that road internally with the GXPM in some cases, where we basically took the IDE of GeneXus, and the people from Flow played the role of the designer or process analyst, and basically this works on the same KB, and you only see some processes and the workflow properties. Additionally, the view of a database administrator Well, I really hadn't thought about this before, but we had talked about the specific development environment, which is to take a KB and on top of it, instead of having an integrated development environment with all of the views as we have today, maybe we could try to focus on each of those roles, the tester or the deployer. And in Tilo, that's a scenario that we would like to improve. We will see this very probably. In terms of deployment, we will be seeing this. That's a good idea. When I say, I hope that I won't be erasing anything, I need to pay attention. Good morning. When you create a frozen version, what happens is that you cannot change anything. But in terms of the definition of the tester, is it the same as the version that was frozen? So I have no way of ensuring that the frozen version will remain frozen, because if someone in the prior version makes a change in charts, it will reorganize the data structure of the frozen version as well. So my suggestion or my request is that for the frozen version, whether we can change the information from the data store so that we can create another data structure or database. With the frozen version, when we are freezing the version, what we are freezing is a repository. That is to say, we are freezing at a font level, at a source level. In terms of the database structure, if you're interested in freezing it as such, it should be an extra step, same as you should be able to freeze binary objects that have been generated. So we get to the freezing part of sources. But what I believe you could do, if you want to do that, the easiest thing for you is to open a version directly from the frozen one, a development version, and from there you can create a new database. But there's also the fact whether you want to copy data. But if you just want to freeze and create a new structure, the easiest thing would be to open a new development version from there on. Okay? So in the freeze, you will store those data so that you won't lose them. But you're not freezing the database. You're freezing the information of where the database was, the properties it had, etc. Same as binary data are not stored. You just store the source GeneXus objects from which you have generated that version. But if you want to generate a copy both of sources or data, you just have to create a new development version. From then on, freeze it. I didn't understand your question very well. What you want is to avoid that once one version has been frozen. Are you afraid that by regenerating that you might have problems with the actual database? If you have a production version here and I'm doing everything I need to do, and when I create a frozen version, both versions face the same base, so there is no way for me to ensure that this database is the same as the other one. I either have to create another one or structure another one. What we do now is to go to one database and change users, passwords, etc., so that the development version cannot access it. Yes, that's another alternative. That is to say, leave the one you had so far and freeze it from the point of view that you're not using it anymore. And in the other one, you can start using other data stores. It's another possibility, but in any case, you have to duplicate databases. You need to copy data if you want to copy them, etc. So, if you can you change the data store of the frozen version? By this, I could use a create database function for a totally new data structure. So you mean to change it and to copy that? Yes, it could be possible. And the solution of creating a new version there, well, what happens is this. In some companies, we have some systems auditing. So when you ask, how will I do this? There's no way for me to ensure that this happens. So I have to manually do some steps so that audit defines this and accepts it. And there's no one who will be changing anything there. Well, I think that we could see to automate something there, maybe as an option. Not in every freezing instance. Maybe this is not required for every instance, but maybe we could do something along those lines. Also, I would like to have a property that when I use a certain SDT method, that because today I have a problem in every item, and if I have a lot of instances, I have to go one by one and do it manually. I'm sorry, but he's speaking in Portuguese, so we're trying to translate him into English. I don't know in what version you're working. In Evolution 1, this is already. No, I have to do it one by one. There's a more general property. This is only in Evolution 2. In the Upgrade 1, there's a property at a KB level where you can specify that property, and that is then transferred to all the SDT's members, even though this is already solved in Evolution 2. And then one last question. When I work with web services, is it possible to store or to save everything that was done in the first time? The URL address, the name of prefixes of objects, because when I do that for the first time, if there's any change in the web service, I need to do that just like that. If something is done, then all the objects are duplicated, so that means a lot of work. So I have to create documents for all the web services that I will place in every web inspector option.
Oh, sorry, I did not understand the question. You want to... No, the case is I do the spec for the first time, and the web service for some reason changed something, so I do the spec for the second time. So if everything is the same, if the URL address and the folders and the prefixes and the name of the external object, because if something does not remain the same, then I have a different object and I have to go and change all the objects. So I would suggest making one that is saved one first time, and then you just do a refresher. When it reads, it takes the the definition that is in the file. The only thing you do is add a prefix. You are based on prefixes and name of a destination object. That's the only thing you can configure. Well, for example, today I do it for the first time. The name of the external object is A, the prefix is AH, and then the second time someone writes A or something else, and you may have then two. The problem is that you have to remember which was the one you used before. For the URL we are saving, you have a combo where you see the last ones you have used, also for the prefix and the name of the object. That's definitely it. Do you add a property for the connect timeout? Is it possible that you may add a property timeout in the DB Connect? Roqueta? Maybe. I'm thinking about it. Timeout, he says, run time. Well, I guess we can do it. It's interesting. We'll have to study it. We'll study it. I guess, yes, we can do it. So what you want is that when the DB connection, you tap connect, if it does not connect, you should be given a code of error, and then to set up the timeout. Yes, if it's local, if it runs in the central, in the main, in our headquarters, that works, but in the branches we have to wait for it to respond. So we have tried to solve it through the JTS to see if we can use a timeout, but we haven't found a solution. So we did something in terms of a solution, but it's very, very ordinary. We would need a property. At the level of data store, do you have anything that could be useful here? We will have to implement it then. We will have to implement it at the level of data store and at the level of DB connection. Maybe we can do some configuration at the level of MS. There is one property, but it doesn't run, it doesn't work. The driver doesn't have a timeout. At least in the JTDS we don't have it. We looked for it, we couldn't find it. If JTDS does not have it, it could be a complexity. We will have to cut it. We will have to interrupt it. We use JTDS to create, but if it doesn't respond, there's not much we can do. But we'll look into it. We will analyze the problem. Good morning. I want to know if you have thought about integrating the query object with the report. Maybe the users use the query object and define a consultation they want to get periodically. So we develop a report and send it via email. It would be better to integrate it in an easier way. We are working on the GEXplorer version 7. There will be a presentation this morning. I will make it, so I invite you to attend. We are integrating for this GeneXus GeXplorer. We are integrating them so that the queries that we have in GeneXus can be exported to GeXplorer and vice versa. Would this answer your question? Well, it goes beyond that. We do applications with a query object. The user chooses a report and then says, this report is important for the company. I want to send it every single day to this list of managers. So instead of going every single day to design it, we want to have one thing ready for all. So with this report, we can access the data, prepare the report, and send it via email. But in the report, we have used codes to access the database with Corit. Instead of saying this report is based on such a query, one consultation. Are those reports just a table with data or a pivot with data, or do you add more things into that report? We have indicators, we have ratios, we compare sales 1 month with another, distribution percentages. So you have graphs and charts. We have not been able to introduce them, but that's the point. We would like to have graphs and charts, and because there are other tools and objects. Some people want to receive these on every single day, so we want this to be automatic. Well, is that a point that has to do with planning, because you have to send the report every single day? Yes, we want to create a report on the basis of a query. If you could send the query object by mail, would that solve your problem? Well, yes, but there are some conditions that are determined by the query, but they are not recorded, so we cannot repeat this function. It's not fixed. The idea would be to have a query, and we would tell the query, this report, take it from the query object, and the report should be based on query, and have the query point inside the report. To review the query object inside the report. Yes, to look at the conditions. Instead of having to rewrite the report, I would like to have a report based on the data already defined in the query, and then you give it a special format. Now, my question is that the query is a report. It does not have the characteristic of being printable, and you cannot reset certain conditions. You cannot print it, and you cannot send it via email. That is why I raised this question. If I could have a set of conditions for that query and then send it via email or print it, would that be useful? Well, maybe we add new features to the query object and integrate the query and the report. The query object today has several formats for export. One is HTML, the other is PDF. So what you see can be sent by mail, but it is not automatic. Well, the thing is that the user has to do that in an interactive way. The user says, this report is good for the company, I want to see it updated every single day. But every morning, I don't want to have to generate it every single day. It would be like a batch run. Well, maybe we are going to provide a series of services to work with the metadata of jQuery and to run this, maybe a service that is sending things via email. That could be useful to you. I have a question. Apart from wanting the query to give you the answer, they want them to select the conditions like provinces, dates, years, and keep that information. Please use a microphone. We would like the user to define a report after having had the query. The user will define the type of format that is more interesting so that he can analyze it periodically. The user will give you the conditions. You can include this in the query object and have it as a fixed thing. But there is no relation between the query object and the report. If the user wants to use it, he will have to go again into the query object, export it, and so on. But the idea is, if this was set, we could organize a report based on the query and send it via email. I also join him in this request. If you choose the right conditions, maybe you could save the conditions for the query and generate a report without having to call development. And then they will tell us, choose this province, choose this date. The user will choose what he wants, and then couldn't that be saved? Those conditions are parameters of the query object that we can receive. The parameters have a default value. If you don't specify the value of the parameter, we follow the default for each parameter. Yes, that's what we can do basically with the query object today. But then we still need to deal with the batch delivery. When you define a query object, as Gustavo said, you define the parameters and the default values. You would need to ask the query to be used as many times as there are changes in the parameters. So the only thing we need to do is to be able to print it as batch. Yes. I think that in this example of the query object, this is just one method of the query object to save the state of the object, to record it, in other words. As you do, you save this condition, and then to have a method to send it via email so that we could program the delivery of reports to the different users. And that is simply generating an object that is then to be sent to users. According to what I have understood, it's simpler than what you think. Let me just raise another doubt. Data selector objects, we cannot use them now with subtypes. Therefore, this may seem to be an architecture system. The subtypes are used for many different things or special activities. Isn't that so? So in some cases they are needed, really. We need to use them. Have you anticipated releasing data selectors to really tap into the power they represent? They have a big potential. Data selectors can be used and should be used. For example, but if the attributes have the same name, but if they are subtypes, no, I'm talking about subtypes. They should work. No, there's nothing else. You are reporting an error that I didn't know about. Yes, if I add the attribute, it has a different name in a table, but then you cannot use them. They have the same name. I don't think we're talking about the same thing. There's something we are missing here. There's something I'm not understanding here. Are you reporting an error? Or are you saying that you would like it to work in a different way? I think it's an error, because if I have a subtype and a table, I need to consulting, and the name of the attribute from another table is different. So both are identified as the same thing. I would like to see an example of that, a practical example. I think it should work. Well, one example could be in accounting, where you have credit and then you have debits, and you need credit in accounts, and this does not allow me to do so. Okay, we'll have to take a look into it. It should work, so we'll check it with you. We only have 5 minutes, so we can take 1 or 2 more questions, and that's all. Morning, I'm Red Golden from Neuquén, Argentina. One tool that we use very frequently among developers is the WeekP and documentation and the portal. And we find GeneXus Research. I'm not saying that it is forgotten, but when we look for something, we find many emails and references to old notations like 98, 95, 2003, 2002. So my suggestion is to give them a date ranking. I know that organizing as a product in each of the searches is going to be difficult because it's an email search, but it would be interesting at least to add 2 parameters like time and date of ranking so that we can organize which are the latest ones. We are working with Evolution and 9.0. I have a suggestion. Instead of giving them a date rating, some of the 97, 98 things are still in operation and very efficiently. Maybe we could give more relevance to things that are new instead of using dates for the classification. There are things that are on and going since 1995 and they are very efficient. Do you get my point? Maybe what is more important is to highlight what is more relevant. Or maybe filter according to versions. Yes, that's my point. Maybe what I suggest is that it's more complicated to do this version filter. That's a concern that we all share with you. We would like the search for documents to improve, and we are working to make that a reality so that the priorities, the things that appear first are the ones that are more relevant, regardless of the date. But if you wanted to have dates as a filter, maybe an advanced version can do that. As Gustavo said, we want to highlight the quality of documents when you do a search. We want to find things that are really relevant, whether regardless of the fact that they may be old or new. Good, thank you. Last question. I want to ask you, why is it that we don't have SDK GeneXus documents yet? It was released 5 years ago, and we still do not have a Java doc or whatever you want to call it. We don't have it. Another issue is user conduct. We have very little documents, very few examples, so we have to do a different kind of engineering. It's a counter-engineering. So place yourselves in our shoes. How can you work without documentation? SDK enter, there's no documentation. We have a very good tool. We can use GeneXus and use a control, but we don't have the information to facilitate the development. Why don't you have it? Is it because you don't have time to do so, or you think it's not useful for the developers? Documents are always useful. But what has happened in the case of user controls, we have tried not to write documents, but and this, you're right, we did not proceed developing those documents. But for the user control, we want to go back to user control redesign, so that you don't have to, you do things automatically and not stop to think about the procedure. And the same is true of smart devices. But the truth is that to write documents relative to integration in a development environment, I know how difficult it is to work without documents, because it happened to me. But this is so broad that we need help from those who are doing extensions to write the document. Because I could have a doc or many other things, but this would be no good contribution to what you need. In the development environment, when we are requested to provide support, we try to solve the specific scenarios. And we would like to have documents for other scenarios. That's the only way in which we can avoid preparing documents for all the classes, because that would not be something that will contribute to your different scenarios. To sum up, for the SDK of GeneXus and the user controls, we want to do something that's automatic. We'll do this with the designer. But with the other cases, we did not prepare documents because we didn't have time, or maybe we didn't have the right focus. So we look forward to receiving support from our partners to indicate what sort of scenarios would require our preparing documents. Some versions are very broad with many scenarios, many potential scenarios, so it's not easy to make extensions. One detail in this regard. I have answered consultations in the extension forum to solve different scenarios, and then Graciela asks me about some other details to document each case. The cases that receive consultation are recorded, and then we also record the way they have been solved. Well, thank you so much. We are readily available if you have any further questions, and we will now proceed with the TILO track so that you learn what the development team is doing. Thank you.